you know, that's yours, you know, it's supposed to be yours. Those kind of things aren't, you know, that's not really supposed to happen. You feel like you've been betrayed when, you know, somebody comes in and uses your land, uses your waterways and your facilities without having the proper rights and agreements to do that.
Water rights aren't the only challenges facing farmers. Conservation and salinity issues also affect their crops. In Utah, roughly 80% of water is used for agriculture. Rivers depend on a steady return of water to the system through runoff or groundwater. But pesticides and salts often pollute the water at its source.
That's always a struggle, to get water out on the desert and get enough water on the desert and do it cost effectively. It seems like we're always working on irrigation pumps and on ditches and on sprinklers, and it takes a lot of expense and time and all to make the desert blossom. If we didn't have the river, we wouldn't be here, I'm sure of that.
But the Dunhams aren't the only people viewing the Green River as the wellspring of life.
But I've always considered Green River home. Eventually, I'm sure they'll plant me in the alkali there.
Aaron Million spent his summers wrangling cows in Green River, Utah. But today, he is an entrepreneur in Fort Collins. As a graduate student, he was staring at a map of the Colorado River system when he had an idea that could have far-reaching effects on Wyoming, Utah, and Colorado.
I saw a little loop coming into the state, and even I didn't recognize it at first. And I looked closely and saw it was the green, and it was literally like a light bulb went off, and started looking at whether the green could be utilized as an alternative water resource for the region and still keep the benefits of the Green River intact.
The plan is to build a 560-mile pipeline from Flaming Gorge Reservoir to Colorado's Front Range. Through it, enough water would be diverted to supply 650,000 homes for a year. But this is not the only plan to capture the green. Expanding urban areas are also hoping to tap into its water. All this is possible due to a 1922 agreement which allotted water to states based on assumptions that critics say were optimistic at best, fictional at worst. It was known as the Colorado River Compact.
Right now we're looking at the Green River and we're looking at Flaming Gorge Reservoir. Number one reason, there's already a reservoir there. It's already capturing water. It has water that is available under the 1922 compact, Colorado River Compact, that is available for both Colorado and Wyoming. When you look at the Colorado River, the headwaters of Colorado have been highly developed to where they've been depleted down to, there are times when there's very little flow left in the stream. As a water manager, you look for what is going to impact the environment the least, what is going to impact dollars the least, what's going to impact the local residents the least. All of those things have to be taken into account before you can ever think about building a project. So you almost have to look at where is some relatively clean water that you can treat conventionally. There's not a lot of that available.
And again, the Green River is offered as a solution to a thirsty American West.
We took the view from day one, and we hired probably one of the best water teams in the western U.S., not to push a bad project forward, but to make sure that the underpinnings were a solid project, environmentally, from a greater good standpoint, and from a conservation and municipal supply standpoint.
The history of the West is replete with mistakes made with water. It seems to me that on about a 10-year cycle, we, somewhere in the West, get the idea to do something incredibly stupid with water. I think this is one of those.
The reason we're looking at the reservoir is to take it off of an existing reservoir. They're still releasing water, and they have to release water downstream because they're generating power off of that reservoir. Okay, so the water is going to continue to be released. And if you take 165,000 acre feet that's been mentioned, off of 3 million acre feet of water, and you do that over an entire year, it's going to be a minuscule effect on the river. Minuscule.
The argument that water developers make that they're only diverting a little bit of water is absolutely ludicrous. As if the river wouldn't notice water being diverted into a sterile canal is foolishness. Having a little bit of water pulled out of a reservoir or upstream the reservoir has major consequences downstream. It has major consequences to the endangered fish in the Green and Colorado River Basin. It has major consequences to the $1 million trout fishery below Flaming Gorge. It has major consequences to other Colorado River Basin water users.
I'm more concerned about how much water Colorado has left to develop under the 1922 and 1948 compacts. And right now we think it could be anywhere from 400,000 or 500,000 on an optimistic scenario down to maybe 100,000 or less on a more realistic or a climate change scenario. So they're talking about taking almost all of Colorado's remaining compact entitlement with one project, and that really bothers us.
What's interesting about Mr. Kuhn's argument is that the state of Colorado should stop development of its beneficial use. The downside to that is that if Colorado does not move forward towards development of its water resources, that other states certainly will and are, and that includes Utah, Wyoming, and New Mexico.
The clock is ticking. Western states have seen enormous growth. In Colorado alone, by the year 2035, the population is expected to increase almost 50% along the Front Range.
I tell people that if I built a 20-foot high fence around Parker and said, no more growth, we're not going to sell another house, it wouldn't save us because I'm tied to the Denver Basin aquifers. They would go outside the fence and drill a well and suck the water right out from under us. We would still have to go somewhere and get water. It's being depleted whether we're taking it or our neighbors are taking it. It's still being used. So it doesn't leave us much option. We have to be always looking for the long-term future.
It's true that people need a place to live, but the idea that we have to dry up or divert yet more water out of one of the most incredible aquatic ecosystems in the American West to do it is ludicrous. There's tons of water in Colorado for growth. At some point, Westerners need to learn to live within their means.
I think it's a human attitude. It's not in my backyard, no growth, all of those things that in a sound bite sound good. You know, no growth. I don't have to worry about there's going to be 10 more people out there in my fishing hole. But the reality of it is you're affecting your own property rights when you take that attitude. And are you going to be able to sell your home? Are you going to be able to move to a nicer home? Are you going to have a job? All of those things have to play into the overall context of what we're talking about here. It's real easy to fold your arms and say, boy, not in my backyard, don't interrupt my way of life. The reality of it is your life is going to be interrupted one way or another, and we're talking about maintaining your lifestyle. And doing nothing is backing up. Your lifestyle is not going to get better if you do nothing.
But increasing populations need more than water. People need energy to fuel their businesses and their homes. Oil shale found deep in the rocks along the Green River Basin has gained renewed interest. A major international oil company has filed for water rights on the Yampa River to develop the technology to extract the oil. The potential output of oil shale in the western United States could be enormous, potentially 3 times that of Saudi Arabia's reserves. But the process requires water. Further, large-scale oil extraction is still in the research phase.
Energy development is the unknown question in Colorado. With the spike in oil prices, both companies in Congress and others have shown a renewed interest in oil shale. And oil shale is a very, it's not like oil. You've got to essentially heat the rocks or crush them and heat them, or heat them in place in order to release the kerogen.